The Kerch Strait Bridge took another punch to the face 2 weeks ago, this time from an underwater Ukrainian sabotage strike using over a ton of TNT. And once again, it wobbled, but it didn't fall. So what gives? Is the bridge indestructible, or are we just doing this all wrong? Let's talk about why the Kerch Strait Bridge is still standing and why blowing up bridges in wartime is a hell of a lot harder than it looks on Twitter. Hey folks, Wes O'Donnell here, veteran, war nerd, and frequent digger through obscure Soviet engineering PDFs so you don't have to. Today we're diving into the myth, the math, and the military headache that is trying to kill the Crimean Bridge. At 4:44 a.m. on June 3, 2025, Ukraine's security service launched an underwater sabotage op on the Crimean Bridge. This thing is Russia's pride and joy, a physical tether tying occupied Crimea to the Russian mainland. It's also a critical artillery for logistics, troop movement, and Putin's delusions of permanence. Ukrainian saboteurs planted a 1,100-kilogram TNT equivalent device on one of the submerged support piers. Boom! The blast wrecked the road deck, tore up some rail fencing, and sent Russian telegram channels into a panic spiral. But here's the kicker, and again, the bridge stayed up. No collapse, no dramatic plunge into the sea, no Michael Bay there furiously scribbling notes, just more scars on a structure that refuses to die. And that's not for lack of trying. The bridge has already survived a truck bombing in 2022, drone strikes, sabotage attempts, and now underwater demolitions. So, what's the bridge made of? Vibranium? Well, let's talk about mechanics, because if we're going to criticize for not collapsing the Crimean Bridge like a Jenga tower, we need to understand what they're up against. First, the Crimean Bridge isn't just one bridge. It's a 12-mile multi-span beast with two main structures, a road bridge and a rail bridge, each supported by hundreds of reinforced concrete pillars sunk into the seabed like stubborn molars. This isn't your average overpass that buckles when semi-trucks take the turn too fast. This thing was built by Russia to withstand earthquakes, tsunamis, and yes, wartime sabotage, though probably not all three in the same week. Each support pier is steel reinforced, concrete clad, and spaced out in such a way that taking out one or even two might just damage a span, not bring down the whole structure. And unlike a Hollywood action movie, bridges don't explode in elegant, symmetrical fireballs. Real-life demolitions rely on precise placement, delayed charges, and knowledge of structural weak points, preferably with weeks of planning and zero small arms fire incoming. Now, here's the thing. Ukraine doesn't get to run rehearsals. These aren't carefully staged demolitions with GoPros and warning sirens. These are high-risk, one-shot sabotage missions deep inside contested waters, usually conducted at night with Russian drones, sensors, and divers trying to kill you the entire time. So Ukraine's been creative. Naval drones? Check. Underwater divers with shaped charges? Check. Truck bombs disguised as civilians? Also check. Each of these has chipped away at the bridge, but none have hit the exact sweet spot needed for total collapse. Why? Because that sweet spot is underwater, armored, and guarded like it's the crown jewels. Never let your critical infrastructure rely on a single point of failure. The Crimean Bridge was built with load-bearing distribution in mind. You could knock out a span, and the rest of the bridge just shifts its weight like an NFL lineman compensating for a busted knee. It's annoying, but it doesn't go down. Even the sea is a pain in the ass. Underwater blasts can be powerful, yes, but they're also unpredictable. Water transmits force in all directions, which is great if you're hunting fish, less great if you're trying to direct an explosive force into a narrow concrete target. It's like trying to hammer a nail underwater with a grenade. In Russia, well, they're not complete idiots. After the last strike, they started parking floating barriers and container ships beneath the bridge. You know a country is spooked when it starts using its own merchant marine as bridge armor. That's not improvisation, that's desperation. So, in tactical terms, we're dealing with a hardened, over-engineered, constantly patched megastructure defended by a paranoid regional power. Ukraine isn't just trying to blow it up, they're trying to outthink it. And that's a little bit of a harder game. But make no mistake, each strike Ukraine makes matters. Not because it topples the bridge, but because it erodes its reliability. If you can't move trains across it without fear of another explosion, it becomes less of a bridge and more of a liability. And in this war, logistics are everything. If you make Russia choose between repairing the bridge and rerouting through Zaporizhia, that's a tactical win, even if the bridge still stands. Bottom line, Ukraine's not losing the engineering fight. They're playing the long game, one blast at a time. So what does this mean strategically? Why is the bridge still the big prize? Because it's not just concrete, it's propaganda. The Crimean Bridge is one of Putin's biggest vanity projects. Its existence is a physical assertion of Russian permanence in Crimea. Destroying it would be like sawing off his favorite armrest. Even if Ukraine can't drop it outright, making it unusable or too expensive to maintain still counts as a win. Every hit drives up the cost financially and politically. From Moscow, every strike adds doubt to Russia's ability to hold Crimea long term. And if you're NATO, watching from the sidelines, every successful Ukrainian hit is a proof of concept for asymmetric maritime sabotage. You better believe this is going into Western military textbooks. But here's where it gets real. Knocking the bridge down won't be one and done. It'll take a sustained campaign, underwater sabotage, drone saturation, cyber warfare, and insider help. This is a war at campaign scale, not blockbuster scale. So here's the thing. For all the battlefield innovation Ukraine has shown with drones, naval sabotage, and asymmetric tactics, there's a glaring problem. NATO doesn't have a modern doctrine for taking out major infrastructure behind enemy lines with zero air superiority and no cruise missile overmatch. Why? Because no NATO country expected to be the underdog. Traditional Western doctrine assumes that when we want to break a bridge, we send a B-2 or a flight of F-15Es with JDAMs, or even a submarine-launched Tomahawk if we're feeling spicy. We overwhelm air defenses, fly deep into enemy territory with stealth or sheer force, drop precision ordnance on support piers, and get out before the enemy knows what hit them. You know, shock and awe, strategy. We're gonna get them terrorists. But Ukraine can't do that. No long-range stealth bombers, no blue water navy, no satellite-spotted carrier-coordinated strike packages. What Ukraine does have, though, is naval drones made from jet skis, ex-Soviet jets retrofitted with Western munitions, and a deeply ingrained culture of making do with whatever's lying around. So here's the doctrinal gap. The West never wrote a playbook for what Ukraine's trying to do. No major military power has ever had to destroy a bridge, like the Crimean Bridge, with such limited assets, under constant surveillance, in a contested littoral zone, without triggering escalation from a nuclear power. That's not a line in any NATO field manual. That's a nightmare scenario from an exercise that got shelved in 2004. And to be clear, the Russians are exploiting this. They've adapted their own doctrine to treat infrastructure as propaganda, not just logistics. The Crimean Bridge isn't just a supply line, it's a symbol, it's a fixed target draped in political meaning. Guarded not by just air defenses, but by media coverage, diplomatic pressure, and the threat of nuclear retaliation if it ever goes down in flames. This forces Ukraine to fight in the gaps between what NATO doctrine would allow and what real-world necessity demands. They're pioneering low-visibility, high-deniability infrastructure sabotage, often using systems no Western general would ever sign off on if they were in uniform. Think underwater explosive sleds, wave-hopping drone boats, and AI-assisted target tracking stitched together on open-source maps. And here's the real kick in the nuts. There's no existing doctrine for that in the West. No official FM series from NATO on bridge kill via modified jet ski. So what does this mean going forward? Well, it means NATO's watching and probably rewriting a few pages. Ukraine's trial and error mad scientist approach to strategic sabotage may become the foundation for a whole new doctrinal wing, one that acknowledges the future of conflict is often waged by the team without air superiority, without a navy, but with Wi-Fi and a death wish. The bottom line, Ukraine is highlighting the uncomfortable truth that Western doctrine isn't built for attritional, asymmetric, tech-savvy trench wars like this, and unless that gap is addressed fast, we'll keep seeing Ukrainian ingenuity fill it, one experimental drone boat at a time. Look, this isn't about scoring points with pyrotechnics. It's about breaking the enemy's spine slowly and methodically. Ukraine doesn't need to Michael Bay the Crimean Bridge in one glorious blast. They need to keep it bleeding money, time, and resources until it becomes more of a liability than a symbol. Will it fall someday? Yeah, probably. But it won't be one blast. It'll be a war of attrition fought in the shadows, beneath the waves, inside the support beams, and across the information battlefield. And when it does fall, I hope there's a camera rolling, because that's going to be one hell of a finale. Thanks for watching, friends. Subscribing really helps the channel grow, so consider hitting the button. And as always, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.